The supply of monkeys for research is shrinking, and access to remaining animals is becoming increasingly unreliable. That's the dire message of a U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine report released today, which concludes that the situation is compromising critical biomedical research now, and will continue to do so well into the future. The new report is the strongest government statement yet on the precarious state of monkey research. Sponsored by the U.S. National Institutes of Health, NIH, and based on information from government agencies, national primate research centers, academic institutions, and more than 200 scientists who use non-human primates, it finds that nearly two-thirds of U.S. researchers have reported challenges in obtaining monkeys. This has delayed studies, forced scientists to use fewer and less ideal animals, heavier or younger than the norm, for example, and, in some cases, has led to studies being abandoned. Monkey prices have also skyrocketed, putting these primates out of reach for many researchers. The shortage has developed as Asian sources of monkeys have dried up and domestic primate centers have been unable to expand their breeding programs enough to keep up with growing biomedical demand, the report says. The report also suggests that China is competing with the United States for the purchase of non-human primates from Southeast Asia, further straining supply. Relying on importing these animals from other countries is unsustainable, the analysis argues. A European report released last month reached similar conclusions. The demand for research monkeys is so high in EU nations, and the supply is so low, that the European Union will not be able to meet its goal of creating sustainable domestic breeding colonies of these animals. Unless a solution is found, non-human primate research in Europe will dwindle and even stop in certain places, says Kirk Leach, Executive Director of the European Animal Research Association. We're moving into a very uncertain world. The reports come during perhaps the most tumultuous 3-year period in the history of monkey research. The U.S. uses about 70,000 monkeys per year in studies of the brain, infectious disease, and aging, the EU about 5,000, and the UK about 2,000. In the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, China stopped exporting research monkeys, shutting off a key pipeline for the United States and United Kingdom. At the time, the U.S. was receiving 60% of its imported monkeys from China. The vast majority of these were cynomolgus macaques, or cynos, a species mostly used by private industry for drug and vaccine research. Rhesus macaques, the primary monkey species used in U.S. academic labs, are mostly bred domestically in the U.S. The U.S. and other countries were able to make up for some of the shortfall by increasingly sourcing monkeys from Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius. But the pandemic spiked demand, sucking up monkeys for vaccine research. COVID left the cupboard bare, and we're still struggling to recover, says Jonah Sasha, an immunologist at Oregon Health and Science University who uses rhesus macaques and cynos to study various infectious diseases. In 2022, Air France became the last major airline to refuse to transport monkeys for research, increasing the difficulty of getting these animals to labs. That same year, the International Union for Conservation of Nature classified cynos as endangered, citing growing demand from the research industry and prompting fears that the animals would become even harder to import. Then, in November 2022, Cambodia, which had largely made up for the shuttered Chinese pipeline by supplying more than 29,000 cynos in 2020, the vast majority to the U.S., was hit with a major smuggling scandal. U.S. investigators charged several individuals with illegally exporting hundreds, and potentially more than 2,000, wild-caught cynos to the U.S. and falsely labeling them as captive bred. Since then, two of the world's largest suppliers of cynos, Inotiv and Charles River Laboratories, have stopped their imports from Cambodia. Both companies tell Science they are working on new procedures that would ensure any monkeys they import have a legitimate provenance. Some groups have claimed that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is blocking monkey imports, But the agency tells Science in an email that it has not implemented any new policies banning the importation or exportation of non-human primates. The US and EU breed some monkeys domestically, a few thousand in total, and mostly for academic researchers, but these facilities, too, have struggled to meet demand. A 2018 NIH report found that because of a growing need for neuroscience, infectious disease, and aging research, the demand for rhesus macaques was likely to outstrip supply in the near future. That shortage came to pass in 2021, and the US government invested more than $30 million extra in monkey breeding at its 7 national primate research centers. But it wasn't enough to abate the shortage, and an additional $30 million requested by US President Joe Biden was eliminated from a 2022 spending bill. It's a slow-motion train wreck we've seen coming, Sasha says.